Hello and welcome to 3G Thursdays featuring Maddy Kramer. Thank you everyone for being here, those who are joining us today and those viewing this recording. I'm so grateful to see so many new and familiar faces. And as always, I gotta give a loving shout out to my amazing parents. And a very special thank you to all of the survivors and their descendants, especially today's guest, Maddy Kramer, who I'll be introducing to you momentarily. We also have survivors here with us today, so I want to give a shout out to all of you, Eva and Evelyn. And you know, there's a special irony that yesterday, descendants of Nazis took to the streets in Germany to march, exclaiming, "We will not be silent again," pledging their support of the Jewish people and Israel. And literally at the same time, yesterday and today on college campuses and in streets around the world and around the country in the United States, including right here in New York City at my alma mater, more anti-Semitic protests and marches have been taking place that are eerily too similar to the 1930s Nazi Germany, all to the soundtrack of Kanye West's new song titled Hail Hitler. On that note, I want to give a huge shout out to our amazing allies, those who may not identify as Jewish, but have Jewish neshamas, Jewish souls. Those who put so much on the line to fight for the Jewish people, often when we are too scared, too silent, or fighting amongst ourselves. And some of these friends and allies are here on Zoom right now with us, and have been so supportive of these programs and of our community. And sometimes they feel alone too, alienated simply because of their support of us. So I want to say thank you, to them. You mean so much to me in our community. I can't thank you enough. My name is Michael Mantell. I'm a psychotherapist, educator, and 3G. 3G stands for Grandchild of Holocaust Survivors, the third generation. I'm the grandchild of Holocaust survivors Mickey Mendelovich from Szego, Romania, and Alice Diamond from Satmar, Romania. In their memories and to combat Jew hatred and Holocaust denial and distortions, I began hosting and producing these programs. In October 2020, with the help of Andrea Bolender, I launched the Sundays with Survivors program, the first of which featured Holocaust survivor Irving Roth of blessed memory. Thank God that program was a success. Because of Irving, Andrea, and everyone who attended and supported these efforts, we added more Holocaust education programs, including Mondays Among the Nations, 2G Tuesdays, and 3G Thursdays, featuring non-Jewish allies and children and grandchildren of survivors. And I continued adding more programs that cultivate Jewish pride and combat Jew hatred, both on and off college campuses. And I am proud and grateful to say that we are going over 4.5 years strong and counting. Maddy Kramer, who is with us today, is a 3G, the grandchild of Holocaust survivors, and the creator of the Last Generation podcast, which brings together Holocaust survivors and their descendants for unscripted conversations about their remarkable stories. Maddy's podcast is a reminder to all of us to stop and ask all of the questions to our grandparents while they are still with us. Maddy's inspiration comes from her own life as a 3G and her wish to have had more time to ask more questions and learn more about her grandparents. Throughout today's program, we invite you to write your questions and comments in the chat. And at the end, we will open up the program for Q&A. No matter how incredible these programs are, and thank God they always are, your participation at the end adds so much more meaning and value. At that time, please feel free to raise your virtual hand using the hand raise emoji for me to see and call on you, or unmute yourself to ask your questions directly. Or I can share your questions and comments that you've written in the chat. And just one save the date before we begin. Please join us on Wednesday, June 11th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time via Zoom for a special program entitled The Many Lives of Anne Frank, featuring author Ruth Franklin. Ruth is the author of the book, The Many Lives of Anne Frank, which has been described as an innovative biography, comprehensively researched, and experimental in spirit. In it, Ruth explores the transformation of Anne Frank from an ordinary teenager to an icon, shedding new light on the young woman whose diary, now translated into more than 70 languages, is the most widely read work of literature to arise from the Holocaust. The book chronicles and interprets Anne's life while also telling the story of the diary, its multiple drafts, its discovery, its reception, and its message for today's world. This book and next month's talk are unfortunately very timely, and I hope you will join us for it. With that, I'd like to once again thank you all for being here and your continued support of these programs, and thank and welcome Maddy Kramer.
Thank you, everyone. I'm happy to see familiar faces. I also have a shout out here, Dinah. Without her, the podcast wouldn't be possible. So thank you so much for connecting me always to the survivors and making this happen. And yeah, as Michael said, I had been doing this podcast called The Last Generation for almost 5 years. And here's a bit of the story, and I'm gonna go through it. Let me know if you guys can see it all. So when I don't work on doing this podcast, I work in advertising. So you will see that the deck appears a little bit like how I present my work and my everyday, but I'm excited to show you what I have. So 12% of Gen Zs and millennials said that they either hadn't heard about the Holocaust or weren't sure if they had. So that's a big stat of people that don't know that really existed, which is terrifying. Um, so how can we meaningfully connect with Gen Zs and millennials to something that is vital and urgent as the Holocaust? And this is how the podcast came to life. And recently we found a stat that says that half of Holocaust survivors alive today will be gone in 6 years. That 70% of Jewish Holocaust survivors will be gone in the next 10 years. So this is like vital to know your stories, to record them, and like have something that is so special as the moment with your grandchildren. Not just to know your stories, but also to find the gaps in your stories and the things that makes you who you are today. That connection is so special. So the way I found that I can bring these generations closer to your stories, to the Holocaust stories, is by creating a podcast, which is stopping exactly where they are, where millennials and Gen Z are. There are 60% of Gen Z and millennials are on podcasts, are listening to podcasts every day. So I thought this was the most authentic way to reach the generation that doesn't know about these stories that they're so vital. Um, and creating these stories in short form makes them more interested and more able to want to connect with the stories than listening to a long story that they don't feel as connected as before. So the idea of the podcast is to penetrate that by creating a space where these generations can actually be more interested at by listening to parts of the story and then be curious enough to learn more about it, right? Um, so how do we make it more than just another testimony and instead something that it's raw, emotional, and filled with stories that haven't been told before? Grandkids become the journalists, and Michael, he was also my first survivor. Such a special one. It's like amazing. Irving was incredible. And why me? As Michael said, I'm Maddy Kramer. I'm the granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor. And I never got the chance to ask my grandma Susie all the questions I had about her experience during the world war. So I created a platform to make sure other grandchildren don't miss their chance. And I had this urge that I really want to make something for someone else, for other grandkids, to have these stories. Uh, so in 2020, I saw these pictures and gallery that Dinah put together for a photographer, and I found this photographer. I think it was in the USA Today, one of these newspapers, and I just sent him an email, and I was like, I have this idea. Can you help me? And he connected me with Dinah, and Dinah was like, I love it. I want to help you, and she started helping me by like getting me connected to survivors. Sadly, I think right after that, the pandemic hit, so we had to take a little break. We all were trying to figure out our lives and what was going to happen. And then in 2021, January of 2021, I just had my baby. She's not a baby anymore, my kid. So, and I kind of needed a space to feel connected to her and to what's happening. And I felt very connected to the stories, and I wanted to know more. So that's when Irving story was recorded and started coming out. And that was the first, and now we have more. And this is a little recap of all the ones that we recorded, and then we have Evelyn here. She's the star of the end of this deck.
My name is Mejo Szerowicz. I born in Poland. Now I am 96-year-old.
I am almost 90 years old.
When I came to Auschwitz, I wasn't Mike anymore. I was prisoner B1148.
It was a miracle the way I got safe because I was selected by Dr. Mengele to go to the gas chamber.
You know that the Nazi killed my mother and my sister in the gas chamber of Auschwitz-Birkenau.
How did going through the Holocaust shape your life and the way that you raised your children?
What were the first weeks like after your parents were taken away? Did you think they were coming back? And when did you realize you might not see them again?
You obviously saw the worst of humanity when you were there, but were there moments of kindness and good? And did you develop any relationships with anyone that you still talk to after the Holocaust?
What do you think was the hardest part about living through the Holocaust?
You have to be sad about it that something like that happens. But personally, if it didn't happen, you wouldn't be here.
Am I living? Am I loving? And creating, in a sense, is revenge. And above all, to see and feel that my great-grandchildren will know that I existed, that their grandchildren will know I existed. That's exciting.
Yeah, I had to ask that question. I don't think I ever knew any of that, and that's pretty amazing, actually, to know that.
So that's a little bit, every time I see this, I still cry. This is a little bit of the essence what the podcast is. We record these conversations, I facilitate the space, and then I have a team with a team of engineers and in a recording studio that helps me put it to life. We edit the whole podcast, and then we make them into short bites that we put in the world through Spotify, through the podcast platform, and give the chance to people to listen to your stories. And I think what is very meaningful is that it's not just the story that you've been telling, but a little bit of that connection between your grandchildren and the gaps on the stories not everybody knows, right? So I want to go to the next one. And some of the survivors you just saw, these are some of our guests. We have now 10 episodes, so it's a huge milestone. Episode 10 actually is Evelyn, she's here on the audience today. And then we wanted to make this bigger than just the podcast, and we wanted to like bring it into film, and wanted to like portray these stories in a very beautiful way. And we were really lucky that Evelyn was very willing and did an amazing job by being hours sitting with us and getting, recorded. And we recorded her story through the podcast and also through video. And this is the first time everyone is watching this, because we actually finished this yesterday. Evelyn here are the little snippets of what you helped me create. So if everyone wants to take a look.
I wanted to touch on that your family was naturalized in France. How did that impact the safety of your family during the war?
My parents got a notice from the head of the police, come present yourself with your naturalization. So then the scenario is, we take your naturalization away, you're foreign Jews, we arrest you. So the other alternative was to be smuggled to Switzerland. That means, of course, separation of my parents for the duration of the war. So we were 10 children, and we went to the station in Grenoble with the passeur. And I don't understand why he did not cross us to Switzerland then. He took us to a field and he said, lay down, stay quiet, and wait until I return. And he told the French police where we were. Because, I mean, the Germans were everywhere. So the police came to get us and said, come with us. And we walked to the police station. One of the policemen says, I don't know what to do with you. So another policeman said, ask us, adjutant, the higher up, so he calls him up. I have 10 Jewish children, what should I do with them? Do what you want, I give you carte blanche.
So that's one. And we have a long form coming soon. It's not ready yet, but these are the 3 little teasers we have from everything. Sorry.
Well, was there a specific event that made your parents decide it was time to leave?
We heard that the Germans were starting to invade Belgium and Holland, and then they started to come to France. So everybody panicked. My father said, where the Germans are, I don't want to be. June 11, 1940, we took 2 little suitcases and we went to the train station. Probably 12,000 people had the same idea. It was mobbed with people. My mother pushed me from the train and we got a train to go south of France. And the Germans were coming. They invaded Paris 3 days after we left. So we were scared, or everybody was scared. So at this early age, not even 8, I found out about Hitler.
This is the last one. Oh, can I hear it?
Did our family celebrate any Jewish traditions, or what was your experience of being Jewish as a child?
Being a socialist in the Bund, you're completely secular. So we didn't observe anything at all. No. Until I came to this country, I did not know about Jewish holidays.
So yeah, these are the new versions of the podcast we are also releasing. So thank you, Evelyn, so much for doing this. They look amazing. I'm so happy what we accomplished together. So some of the learnings out of doing all these 10 episodes is survivors are afraid that the history is going to repeat itself. They don't see themselves as victims. They're positive about life and see it as a gift. And their best revenge was to have family of their own. And what had we done since we launched? So we recorded 10 episodes. We hosted a live episode at the Museum of the Jewish Heritage. We was the 15 most shared podcast globally. We filmed our first video podcast featuring Evelyn. And what we want to do next? We want to be in every classroom in America and hopefully the world. We want to record and film the next 10 episodes. We want to expand beyond the Holocaust stories and include other movements like the civil rights movements, because it's every story that we want to record. And we want to reach a wider audience across platforms and communities. So yeah, this is the last generation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Maddy. Beautiful presentation. Thank you for taking us on your journey. I'm wondering if you can do us a favor and share a little bit first about your, I think your grandmother, right? You should talk about your grandmother as a Holocaust survivor. If you could share a little bit about her testimony as well, if that's possible.
Yeah, actually, I did not know her story until recently. I think 2 years ago, when I was on contact with the Shoah Foundation, trying to see if we can work together, and they were very, very nice, and they sent me her testimony. What I had learned is that she was from Hungary, so she was in Budapest. So it was one of the last countries to be part of the war, and she her dad um got attacked by the one Nazi, and he was in a hospital, so she went and worked for that hospital, and kind of survived that way. She actually also got married, which was very young, just because she heard that if you were married, had more chances of survival. After, she talks a lot about how actually the Russians were there, and they were like, not great, and how they were like, uh, raping girls, and like the things that they were happening there. And they ended up escaping to Italy, and they came back after a while to Hungary. My uncle was born there, and they after years they moved to Argentina. That's where they had family at, and like new family. So a lot of her close friends and people she knew, they went to Argentina. And she was there since she passed away uh, 20 years ago.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's so important. And I believe that's like sort of the impetus, as you said, for this project and the format. So I also want to say that it's so wonderful to finally collaborate with you on this program. We were connected thanks to Dinah Kramer, who was on 2G Tuesdays. So I think it's wonderful that you're here. And as I said, Evelyn and Eva were on Sundays with Survivors. So it's wonderful to have everyone here. And I think Ron joined, and Ron was on Sundays with Survivors with his grandfather. So speaking of having more people connected. One thing I find it's beautiful is that we've also worked with many of the same survivors, thank God. And like you said, in the next 6 years, half of the survivors who are alive will no longer be with us. And they say between 10 and 15 years, there may be no survivors of the Holocaust remaining. So this work is really important. So I find your program to be very unique. And I really admire you for it, because you do this format where you're not asking questions and you're not having a survivor or descendants. You're having descendants in conversation with survivors. So can you talk a little bit more about that format and how you came up with it? Because I mean, I know why you came up with it, but I would be too afraid to put it together. So how did you manage to do this?
Yeah, well, first, I wouldn't have managed without Dinah. So like she has all the credit. But what made me like, I feel like I've been very lucky to meet a lot of survivors in my life, and like I've been part of, the Jewish community. Grew up in Miami, where like there's, a big Jewish community, and I always felt that the stories that being told about the survivors were so, so important. But there was, even for like the stories of my own grandma, I always felt like there were gaps on the stories I couldn't understand. When do you learn the language? English. How do you manage to move to a new country? Like things that like felt like, what are those triggers that you still have that reminds you of the war? Like how, like the little things, because I think and some of you, which is very brave, you bring and you tell us your stories because you're opening your heart. But like I feel like there's a point that you repeat it so much that you know it by heart, and the details sometimes are lost. And I think they're things that only their own families will understand and know what to ask. Like I wouldn't know, because I don't know you that much, right? So I think grandkids understand the power of spending their lives with their grandparents, and the things even know, as you can saw, like on the Irving story, they were like, he talked about the war all the time, and there were things they still didn't know because there were the little details on the story and the little things that made them different, right? And I think what makes the podcast for me so special is that it just connects them from a different place. It's just connecting the generation from a different point of view, right? It's about how the things that happen in the world trickle all the way to us and our grandkids and our kids and all of the things, because it's like one of the stories that one of the survivors had was like, I have a problem with food. I cannot leave food in a plate because I feel it reminds me of the war without even noticed. And the kids were really young actually, and they were like, oh, I didn't know it was that. I always felt like you made us eat because, like because of something. And like they connected the dots that was something that for him, like it trickled from this moment of the war that in a way trickled to every generation, right? And I remember when I was young, I was reading the story of Diane von Furstenberg, and she actually talks a little bit about that, like how she felt like her parents were always mad and she didn't understand, and like how she reacted certain ways because of her parents. And then when she grew up, it's like I didn't understand because I couldn't comprehend what they went through, right? And I think it's a bit of that trickling of effects of what happens, and I think it doesn't just happen through the war, but I think obviously the impact of the war creates certain things. And I think it's just the details. It's a little bit of that thing that you can only see in your own family. And I think that makes what makes the conversation so special, because it's just a connection I can't, like, as much as I would like to, I wouldn't get a chance to know Evelyn in the same way as his grandkid know you, right? Because I don't spend all this time with her or with survivors. So I feel like that makes it so much special, just because of the way, and the conversations are so natural and so profound. Like some of them were like, there was one of the kids that were like, I came out to you and you were so open to me, and like it felt like such a special moment that I could not translate because I'm not the owner of that story, right? So I that's why. And I be like Dana, you've been there as a witness in a lot of them, and I think, I don't know if you have anything to add.
All right. Well, I wish you would stop giving me so much credit. All I did was connect Maddie with survivors, because I'm a 2G and I'm a docent at HMTC, at the Holocaust Memorial Tolerance Center in Glencoe. And I used to work with Irving when I retired from teaching. So I know a lot of survivors, and that's where I made the connection. That's all I did. The rest concept is Maddie. And it's a nice way of learning the stories in a different way. And it's a different lens that you're learning the story. You're not hearing the whole story. You're only hearing maybe bits and pieces of the narrative. And as most of us know, when you hear a survivor speak, it's trauma, and the survivor has to protect themselves, and they can't give that emotional component each time they tell the story, because you're reliving trauma. And when the grandchildren ask them questions, it's a different perspective. And some of these things, one of the survivors, I've heard her give testimony many times, and it was through her conversation with her grandchildren that I learned a different piece of her story that she wasn't telling in a 45-minute session when she's giving testimony. And that's what it makes it real. And the reality is that most survivors didn't start speaking until they had grandchildren, because they wanted to protect their own children or move on with and rebuild their lives. And it was only until they had their grandchildren, even including Irving, when the grandchildren started asking them questions. So it's beautiful, and I will get you more people, and Michael will as well. And we're going to keep doing this because it's important.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dinah, for sharing. Yes, Dinah, I think you're a little too modest and humble. You do a lot of incredible work at HMTC, the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center on Long Island, and also making these connections. You connected us, you're connecting each of us to different survivors and families, and that is such a huge task as well, and all the work that you're doing outside, so thank you. So Maddy, speaking of like working with families to do this work, I've learned, and Dinah sort of alluded to this, that some families, especially like 2Gs, you know, children of survivors, but also 3Gs might not feel comfortable asking questions to their family or grandparent. They don't want to hurt them. It might feel too close. So, or some might not even know how to do that. So how do you prepare them? How do you work with them to prepare for that interview?
Yeah, so I do host like a little session with the grandkids before, and we work together for like a Google document where like we use some questions that have been done before. Like, as again, they are so personal, the questions that I just guide them to the things I feel obviously the audience will be interested in listening. At the end of the day, we want to get people also to listen to these stories and then guide that conversation and like make sure we have things that allude a little bit to the story of the survivor, but at the same time gets to that part of the connection, right? So we talk about that. I think it's most of the survivors that we had on the podcast are survivors that have been talking about their stories before, so they feel comfortable about talking. And I think where the conversations are very beautiful, as Dinah was saying too, it's like are the little nuggets of things that we're missing, right? Like I think, for example, one of the survivors told us that she was in a sewer for a lot of months. And she told us that the first time she came out, she couldn't see and she only saw yellow, right? And the grandkids didn't know that. They didn't know, like she never spoke about, she talked about living in a sewer and like all the trauma and like having a a brother that was very young, but like she never spoke about the vision she had in the moment she came out, right? And right this second, she went back to that moment and remembered that, right? So, the little nuggets just happen very natural, and also part of the conversations, even though they come with questions, because most of the time we have more than one grandkid. Like they just sometimes some questions happen on on like spontaneously, right? It's like more of like they're following the story and the cadence of the conversation, and they have new questions.
Wonderful. And then what in your life prepared you for this work? Because again, it's a lot more challenging than most of these interview type programs.
So as I said at the beginning, I work in advertising. I'm a creative by trade. I've been working on this industry for a long time. And I think that kind of prepared me in the sense like I am a very conceptual person that I've been, working with a lot of clients and selling big ideas. You know, when I'm not doing this, like hopefully get a Super Bowl ad to do, right? So I think that that prepares me a little bit to like see this as like as a creative challenge, as a creative project, and use my learnings from that to like use the creative process to bring it to life. And I always tend to uh, use projects that are very insightful. This is one of my many projects that I do on the side. I'm actually working also on a children's book about periods on the side, and had created multiple work that tends to help different type of people, and they're very personal. All my projects are very close to who I am and my values, and I think that helps a lot to the type of work I like to do. And yeah.
Beautiful, thank you. Shamai, I don't know if I'm saying your name correctly, I apologize. You did put a beautiful comment in the chat. Do you want to ask it, or would you like me to? You can let me know and I'll be happy to ask it, unless you want to unmute yourself. I'll give you a moment. Yeah.
No, please go ahead.
No, please. It was a beautiful comment, and I think it's very timely. You would like me to ask it, is that correct?
Sure.
Okay, sure. So Shamai says, congratulations on the wonderful work you are doing. And considering the reality of what Israelis are living in today, the process of recording the present stories of survival are so important, and so many people don't believe what happened on October 7th. So we're living this quote unquote Holocaust denial today with October 7th, denial and distortion. So Shamai just suggested or thought this could be a beautiful program to share the stories of October 7th. So putting it out there as a beautiful idea, especially as you said, that you're thinking of broadening this. And
Yeah, I would love that. That's the idea, to like have more of these stories. Like I think the last generation as a concept is more than just the Holocaust. The Holocaust was what I intended to start because that was what it was very close to me and to my heart and what I needed. That was my catharsis, maybe, to be close to my grandma's story, you know. But what I see about this podcast is that it has endless opportunities of telling every story. Like I wanna, if I can do this forever and tell every story of things that needs to be recorded so everybody knows, you know, I think that's what the purpose of the podcast is. It's like every story that it needs to be told I want to record, right? That's why I also talk about the civil rights movement, you know, like um it, a lot of them are also passing away, right? And like I wanna, it's so important now and ever to like talk about segregation and have things that happen. And like I think October 7th is also so important, and everything that is going on, it needs to be somehow recorded, and hopefully we can get a new generation to listen to it. That's why Michael and I are gonna work together to bring it to schools and bring more of this, and be part of education. And I see your question, Jacobs. Actually, I do have some data. This is not the latest, but I do have that from the podcast, which we don't have any media behind. So this is more like, you know, word of mouth. So hopefully all of you will register on the podcast, subscribe after this, and send it to your friends and family. So the more people we get to listen to it. But for the little people that knows about it, we had 1,000 listeners since. So again, no media, no advertising, no PR yet. And then on the Gen Z and millennials, 36% of listeners are millennials, and then 17% are Gen Z. Yeah, so we are kind of like, that's the biggest generation that is listening to it. So making it justice.
Awesome. And thanks for that question, EJ. And just for those who aren't able to see it, because we're also recording this, EJ asks, do you have any barometer of how your podcasts are received by Gen Z? So appreciate you answering that, Maddy.
Yeah, thank you.
And somebody also asked, but you answered this already, how do you find and connect with survivors and family members? You shared a little. I don't know if you have any other comments that you want to share about that.
So what's the question? Sorry.
How do you find or connect with survivors and their family members? You mentioned Dinah, and you said being
I think it's more like a connection, and hopefully all of you will help me find more survivors. That's a bit of what I would love to like get more people, and like but yeah.
And Irving Roth was the first survivor featured on your podcast. He was also the first featured on my Sundays with Survivors. Incredible man, human being, speaker. He was just a giant. Of course, he'll be missed. And I think we both connected with him in 2020, and just months later he passed. So thank God we were able to share his testimony, and he shared it around the world.
Yeah. And her grandkids actually reached out to me when he passed and thanked me for having the opportunity. That was the last thing they did together. From there, so I'm very lucky. Sadly, for what I know, from the 10 people that we have recorded for already passed away.
Yeah, I have a similar number in those I've had on the program. Nancy has a question, but before she asks it, I just wanted to ask the question regarding Irving and your first program. Can you talk about what it was like doing your first program, and what you learned from that point doing this work?
So that one was like the longest episode we did. Obviously, Irving was a talker, and his wisdom was just amazing, and you can hear him all day. Like he was just amazing. So we learn. I cannot learn to do the podcast through him, to be honest, because a lot of it I didn't know. I didn't know how to do a podcast. I just made it, and that this is a bit of how I am. That's my MO. Like just make it. I recorded it and then gave it to this friend that has the production house. I was like, hey, what can we do with this? So I learned to edit the podcast to like, start putting things together, how to like tell a story, how to create momentum and like make sure that we can get the best of the bites and like so I learned a lot from that one. I think from that episode on we started like making shorter ones. Um we actually have a bilingual one, which is very interesting because I reached out to a reporter from the New York Times. I was talking about a story about the survivor that was playing the piano to people on the balcony during COVID, that was also a survivor. And I reached out to her and she put me in contact with him. He was 90 years old and was still practicing law, and he was amazing. But he spoke French because he was from Brussels. So it's half in French, half in English. That I think is the shortest episode. Such a magnificent story. So yeah, I think I learned a lot, and then had like very intimate moments with all of them. Like I just want to record more and more just to have those moments, and then we're learning a lot through what we just did with Evelyn. We recorded this story with Evelyn in October. Evelyn was a champion. She was there for like 6 hours and glam up and amazing. They're helping us bring this to life. And now we're learning to create this different type of video podcast too, right? So we're finishing the long form Evelyn that it's 20 minutes. So nothing goes over 20 minutes, more or less. We just want to make sure like everything feels short and easy to digest and learn.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Nancy, thanks for
Hi.
your hand.
Thank you so much for the amazing work that you're doing. It's super interesting. You mentioned before, like how to bring these stories and this work into schools and younger generations. So I have a daughter who is a JSU in high school. And I was just wondering if you had any suggestions for her. She's studying, so she's not here, but otherwise she would have been.
Yeah, I'm actually putting together like a curriculum that I would love to bring, but I think my ideal world would be like when they're talking about the Holocaust, like like presenting this as part of the material, right? Like I feel like what would be very interesting is instead of like giving you the chance to go watch, the Schindler's List, that obviously is very important, but it's a 4-hour movie, maybe go and listen to the podcast and hear some stories and be curious, and then that takes you to the Schindler's List or to a book, right? I think it's I also have a nephew that is 15 years old, and it's very hard to have their attention. Like we're in a generation that the span of content is very, very short. So it feels like a very nice entrance to the story through not a lot of commitment through them, but like if they're interested enough about the story, they will be curious enough to keep learning about it. So my ideal will be to bring it to schools that way, to like when it's part of the curriculum, hopefully they can offer as part of what they can be learning, instead of reading a book or watching Schindler's List, and pick their curiosity in another way, and a way that they're already at. I think it's easier to ask them to listen to a 15-minute episode than asking them to watch a movie for 3 hours. So,
Excellent. Thank you. Sorry, what is the name of the podcast again?
The Last Generation.
Okay, thank you.
I can put the link here too, so you guys all have it.
And we'll also share the link in the follow-up email, so everyone can click on it, view, and share. And also, I just want to say that the format of the podcast and the program works so beautifully, not only because of the length, but also because it's young people on camera and speaking as well. So I think it speaks to the generation that are in class in schools right now. So I think it's an excellent format. I just want to remind everyone that during the Q&A, you can raise your virtual hand to ask questions or comments. You could unmute yourself if I don't see you, or you can write your questions or comments in the chat and I'll read it for you. So Maddy, you did a live recording of your podcast with Holocaust survivor Mark Schoenwetter and his family. Yeah. I love Mark, he's so wonderful, and that's very exciting that you were doing that. I watched it, it's on recording in the Museum of Jewish History. Can you talk about that collaboration and what that was like for you? I mean, that's a pretty spectacular program.
I know, it was so exciting. Sadly, it wasn't like with a lot of notice, so we didn't fill up the whole space. It was a big space, but I know it has a lot of viewing on YouTube. But you know, I really will wanted like to connect with museums and get a chance to get survivors, and like we felt like it was a very nice way to like expand the podcast and get people to listen from another angle. And it was amazing to be there and like get a chance to be on the museum. I wish I can do it in every museum. You know, I want to go to the one in DC and like, you know, the one in Israel. Like, yeah, it was a very nice way of doing the podcast, and I felt like it was a really nice way to connect to the audience of the museum as well. So I was very lucky that they were interested in it, and I think I sent a lot of emails until they responded. So and they said yes, and they were yeah, very excited to put it there, and hopefully we'll do more in the future.
It was really wonderful, and I do agree. It's just the start. You'll be featured in all of these museums. Somebody asks, can you talk about the importance of this work as we go into the final decade of being with survivors, and especially post October 7th?
Yeah, for me, it's, I think I said this, but for me, it's like, we are the last generation to listen to these stories. Like, we are responsible to keep telling these stories. You know, after October 7th, more than ever, I feel like as I'm married to a non-Jew, and I think like when October 7th happened, he couldn't comprehend what I was feeling. You know, like like if you're not Jewish, I think you can be an ally. You can feel for what it was happening, but never to the point of like you felt that you were again in the space where our grandparents were, right? I felt all this responsibility to make sure we can keep telling these stories, because we are the last generation to have the chance to meet all of you, all the survivors here. Like, you know, it's incredible that we get the chance to know your story, and I wish you didn't have to, that you have not been through that, you know. And I think it's so important to like learn these stories, to tell them, to keep talking about them, to remind the world that we are all human beings and we are should care for one another. And I think sadly, as a humans, we're not learning anything. You know, I it's not just October 7th, right? I think in like the world, it's even here at home, it feels that we're not learning much about, you know, how we care about immigrants and the people that we care, because at the end of the day, here all of us are descendants of immigrants, right? So I feel it's important to tell the story, just because as Jewish values is to care about people's lives, and that make hopefully doesn't make it worse of what is happening in the world. And again, October 7 was, I think, as a Jew, like it just destroyed us, you know, like internally, like it just took us to the worst place that we can feel, that where our grandparents went to. And I want to make sure that every story is said. That's why I think when I talk about expanding the podcast, it's not just about the Jewish community, it's about all of us, like that, you know. Again, I'm Hispanic. I grew up in Argentina. You know, like I feel what is happening here as well. And I think those stories are also important. It's important to record every story. It's important to record the civil rights movement, just because also they're like, no one is going to know that, and tomorrow it could happen again, right? Someone will make a decision that will separate us once again. And I think every story needs to be listened and learned, so we can all take the responsibility to keep teaching the next generations.
You know, it's amazing how our history and current events as Jewish people prompts us to do this work, and yet it speaks to, you know, the need for people's stories, anyone's stories, to be shared. And so it's so beautiful that you're taking your own experiences, creating such a beautiful format, a forum, this podcast, but also understanding that everyone has gone through something and their stories can be told, and it's a very beautiful sentiment. So thank you for sharing that. You know, I just want to say Evelyn is here with us. Don't want to put her on the spot. She is one of my favorite people. If she wants to share about her experience doing the work with you, by all means, Evelyn. If not, because I am putting you on the spot, I don't want you to feel like you have to. But I love Evelyn, and to hear her and to be here with her, it's always a pleasure. So.
Well, I'm glad that Maddy is doing this work, and it's important. I mean, we have a tragic inheritance, unfortunately, but it has to be told, and it's wonderful. And I'm so thankful to my grandson for doing this. It's great that he's, you know, doing it. But by the way, my name is Evelyn, and it has an E at the end.
Yeah, you're right.
I hope you can fix that. But I'm very happy that you're doing this important work, and I hope, you know, many people will follow you in doing this.
No, thank you for doing it. And like, again, like you were amazing. You were there for hours, you know, with all these cameras in your face and getting all these people around you. And we're so lucky. You were like a star. You were the star, Evelyn. She got makeup done. Like she was looking beautiful, and her story was so powerful. We were like so lucky that we got a chance to go to your house. You opened the doors for us and got a chance to film you what you felt the most you, and it just was, we're so lucky that we had you, and that you're the first film one, and we want to keep doing more of this. The team was so grateful for getting this together. We have one of the most important post-production companies of New York editing Evelyn's story. So this is how much the story values, right? Like it's like these people are doing movies and Super Bowl commercials for a living, and then took time of their work and their team to spend it to make Evelyn's story come to life. So I feel very grateful for the community and the people, and that it's rally around this idea to make all of it happen. I wouldn't be here without the team that helps me make it happen. Like people are volunteering their time, even non-Jewish people volunteering their time to bring these stories to life, and work on this because they truly believe on the stories that we're telling.
I was very grateful, and it's wonderful that you did this. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think that's the wonderful thing about this work. Evelyn has shared her testimony in many different formats. She was on my program sharing it herself. She was just featured speaking with her two daughters and her grandson, Matt, at 3GNY, the organization I'm on the board for. We had this beautiful program and International Holocaust Remembrance Day dinner where she spoke, and it was incredible to hear it. She did Witness Theater, Witness Project, where she did a program with high school students, and then Maddy being featured on your program. So I think it's so incredible being able to feature the same testimony in different ways. I think it's so important because it adds dimension to the stories. There were things that I learned from watching her Witness Theater that, from that I didn't know when she spoke on my program, and then when she spoke with her two daughters and grandson, and then also on your program. So I think it's so beautiful. And one thing that I learned from doing this work, initially it was like, we got to get these testimonies out there. People need to hear it. Then I realized it's not just about getting these testimonies out so other people can hear it, but it's being there with survivors who are human beings who've lived this, and being with them in the room and listening. Right? It's such an incredible, realization that it's not just a story to be told, right, for other people to hear, but for us to be present with the person who's telling the story.
I feel so lucky I get a chance to sit in those rooms. Like it's like I so grateful that I get to spend, those hours with the families and be there and be a spectator of what is happening. It's just so incredible to see it and unfold. Like those conversations are like you're in a dinner table, and like you get so lucky to be part of that. I just feel um so like for me, hopefully one day we all become viral and this podcast is everywhere in everyone's favorite recording of their Spotify. But what I take with me is I can get to record these stories and be part of of making them happen. And I'm in that room that no one else gets to be. So that's what I take with me, regardless of how famous the work is.
I think,
Yes.
I think we should also remind people that like my story is not only for survival, but it's of resistance. That many Jews, like my parents and my sister, resisted, were part of underground organization, network, and they helped other Jews, many other Jews. And that was so important to remind people we did resist a lot.
Yes, you did. We're very lucky that you guys did because we wouldn't have you here if not.
And so proud of my parents and my sister of what they did during the war, really.
It's
We were
incredible.
the lucky one because we were a family that survived, so we were very, very lucky. But went through double jeopardy of being Jews and being part of a resistance network.
Yeah, Evelyn's family story is one of survival, but also of resistance. It's an incredible story that she shares. Jill has a question. Jill, would you like to ask the question by unmuting yourself? I would love to hear from you. And also everybody, Jill is an incredible person involved in this space as well. So someone who we should all know.
My question for you is, how has your approach and your methods evolved over time? Because I know when I started interviewing survivors, and I'm basically involved with one town, I made some connections, but I realized that maybe I wasn't asking the right questions, or maybe I wasn't connecting in the best way with them. So it was a big learning process. Mark Schoenwetter, interestingly enough, is actually he from a town not far from Tarnov, and he grew up after the war in Tarnov. And so when I was interviewing him, it was more about his post-war experience. And I realized that, I was trying to isolate part of his history that should not have existed in a vacuum. So I have, it was a long learning curve, how to speak to survivors, how to interview them, how to maybe change their focus a little. And I'm curious, since you do this much more professionally than I do, and multiple towns, and I can make some associations based on the fact that I know the town, and I can create some associations with people. But my question again is, how is your approach, your methods, your connections? How have they evolved over time as you've made this, journey?
I don't think that much, because again, like as grandkids are the ones asking the questions, I think it's more what I did learn is what I think is more impactful is when we do have those moments that they feel less scripted, more authentic. It's less about the story of survival, but more about the story of their life and how the war impact them. And the moment when grandkids connect back to their grandparents, and through the story that they're telling about how they survived the war, but less about the story itself. Like, I don't know if it makes sense, but like I what I learned, like when I am editing the podcast, it's those moments that feel so special is when there's a question or there is a moment they're not expecting, right? And I learned that we need to guide the conversation that way in order to get those moments. There was a survivor actually that told us that every time they heard the train, it took them back to the Holocaust. And and I think those are the moments I want to take away, right? Those are the moments that and also learn that to have like a little closing moment of the podcast, right? Like how growing up Jewish, how what's the message to the next generation? How we asked Evelyn, which just recently happened October 7th, and I think having those conversations are part of something that also we're been integrating to the podcast. But what I learned is the most special moments are when the conversations are a bit more targeted through their own stories and not just about the testimony.
Maddy, I have one more question that's going to be tied in from someone who registered for the program, asked the question when they registered, and I'll tie it into the question that I have. So Svetlana states and asks, this talk is so close to home. Thank you for making it happen. I know I need my family's and my story heard also. How do I do that? So I'm going to tie that in with the question. Do you have any advice for those interested in learning how to start telling their or their family's story?
Wow, that's hard. I don't know if I have an answer to that, but I will say come to the podcast. I will happy to record you, get these stories out. I think it's depends of the age of the kids, little by little. There's some families that are more open than others. Like my grandma never spoke about the war. That was something that never was a conversation. Little bits and pieces you kind of gather together, right? Like she'll be like in South America and Argentina in like New Year's Eve, they do a lot of fireworks very close to your face. Like it's not like here that they're prohibited. And she will say, I don't like fireworks. It reminds me of the war, right? And like those are the things I will take and then had to process growing up. And I think, depending on the age, I think little by little they will be started to tell the story. But I would say come. We're happy to record these stories together. We want to have more survivors, and more stories to tell. And yeah, in audio or if you're in New York, we go with a camera, film you.
So with that, I just want to say again, Maddy, thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing, platforming these incredible stories and in the unique way that you are doing it. I know you will be successful, so I do not need to wish you luck, but I will anyway. And thank you so much for doing this for us. Dinah, thank you so much for helping to make this happen. Evelyn, it's so beautiful to see you and to know that your story and your family story is being shared with so many. I got to give a shout out to our allies, and Rosa, who is always here, always supporting, is one of those allies who is absolutely incredible. And I'm so blessed to know her and so grateful. I just want to do another shout out to her and everyone else. And everyone, thank you so much for being here. Maddy, just one more time, because you can never hear it too much. Can you share where and how people can find your work, your podcast, and then we'll share it again in the follow-up email.
Yeah, I would say if any of the survivors here on today or 3Gs or 2Gs, please reach out if you want to be part of the podcast. I'd be so lucky to have you. Evelyn can tell you all about it. So please reach out. And Jill, you mentioned that you know a lot of survivors. We're always looking for survivors. So like if you want anyone that you feel will like to participate, let me know. But yeah, the podcast is on Spotify or any place, Apple or Google. It's called The Last Generation. And you will find it there. Hopefully you saw the link, but follow it so you can keep seeing all the episodes. There's only 10 episodes. So it will not take you more than 2 hours to listen to all of them. Hopefully you listen to all of them. All of them are so special in their own way. And then Evelyn's long feature hopefully be out and about in a couple of weeks. And I will share with you, Michael, so you can share it with people. We're trying to see if we send it to some festivals, film festivals. So maybe we get Evelyn to the Crozet on Cannes, and make her famous there with her amazing story that she's telling. So thank you so much, everyone, for having me and listening to me, and yeah, giving me the space to talk about it.
Thank you so much, Maddy Kramer, for all the work you do, for being here with us, and thank you all for being here. Take care, be well.
Thank you,
Maddy and Michael, for all you've done.